All right, Doug, we are back with questions from our viewers and members of the file. First question for you is what hold does Ukraine have on the US government? I mean, why would the Senate meet the night of the Super Bowl to pass some horrible spending package? Are they being blackmailed? Something else? None of this makes any sense. And they know the American people are against it.
Yeah, I don't understand how politics, or particularly the Senate, works. So I can't testify as to that, other than to say that members of the Senate, or for that matter, Congress, they're basically all absolutely horrible people that live in a bubble. Um, I didn't even know that they met on the night of the Super Bowl, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's when they passed that, whatever was it, $95 billion, global protection bill, basically money for Taiwan. And
Global protection, for God's sake. It's funny, the titles they give these bills are always, in bizarro world, upside down, the opposite of what they'll actually wind up doing. It's perverse. Well, there was something that I was thinking about to do. Blackmail. That was the point he brought. Is the US government being blackmailed? I don't think you can blackmail the government. I mean, it's too much of an amorphous blob to blackmail something like that. And it's always doing criminal things. So, no, the US government, I don't think, can be blackmailed, but it should be fairly easy to blackmail individual members of the US government. And I'm of the opinion that well, Hoover was famous for doing this, for investigating everybody that was of any importance in Washington and building a file on them, and subtly making it known that he knew stuff that they would not want widely known. So sure, it started with Hoover. Well, it started since the dawn of history with blackmailing people that have done naughty things, which of course is a good reason not to do things that you can be blackmailed about. Keep clean hands if you possibly can. But I'd say that the NSA in particular, and I don't know how many other government agencies have the capabilities like that of the NSA. They've got to find all kinds of dirt on these people by monitoring their electronic communications and other things. So, yeah, individual pals can be blackmailed. Can they blackmail a group of them to act together? Well, I don't know. It's possible. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's clear there's levels of blackmail involved and stuff. I mean, I think well, you'd have to assume that it's true because, these people are doing things that isn't in their obvious political interest, things that are very unpopular with their base back at home, but they still push forward with it. And I think so they're not acting clearly just as representatives of the voters. They're motivated by something else. And I don't think it's saving democracy. But there's another, I guess, the more conventional theory might be that come from Richard Mayberry. I just finished earlier this week his book on World War II with my daughter for homeschool, and he talks about power seekers and the motives of power seekers, and he says, he says, if you're not a power seeker, war is just a big waste. But war is the most thrilling and therefore the most satisfying expression of political power. If you're a power seeker, war is nirvana. War is not the route to nirvana. It is nirvana. War is an end in itself. It is the big payoff for power seekers.
Because certainly in previous times when you were not supposed to be loyal to your nation or the democracy, you were supposed to be loyal to your ruler. What these rulers basically did for a living is go to war. I mean, they're always raising armies and fighting each other for God knows all kinds of reasons. So I think Rick is quite correct. That's very astute on his part.
And I mean, you
And
can see the bloodlust in like Lindsey Graham. You can like see the bloodlust. Like it is so deeply satisfying to him.
it's amazing, this creepy little faggot, and he has bloodlust. I mean, God, Listen, the way to solve it with these people is insist that they engage in a cage fight with their opposite number in the Russia or whatever, or the Houthi kingdom or whatever.
Right.
Every
Yeah,
one of them lose to the Houthis, I promise you. Man or
exactly.
woman, they'd all lose.
Or they can raise and lead their own legion, and if they feel like it's so important.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, go over there, raise your personal legion, and personally fight the Houthis. Okay, that's great. No harm done. Both parties will enjoy it. That's great. But wait a minute, talking about blackmail, look at look at that horrible little creep that runs the Ukraine, Zelensky. It is Zelensky.
Zelensky. Zelensky.
Zelensky. Yes, of course. Um, in the Panama papers, and this was 5 years ago, so a lot of people have forgotten. There was a law firm in Panama called Fonseca, and it was a German name. Anyway, these guys built a real business for themselves, setting up offshore companies. And so you don't know who owns the company, uh, or no accounting for money going in or going out of it. In any event, um, there were lots of very important political characters that it turns out had these undisclosed shell companies. And it appears that I keep saying Zelensky because, of course, he seems like a much more decent person than Zelensky. Anyway, at least he has some. Anyway, Zelensky had a company that, as I recall, had $500 million in it. Now, how does a second-rate comedian from the Ukraine wind up with $500 million in his company? Or is that true or not true? I mean, all this stuff was covered up and went away and so forth. It's not in the news cycle. Nobody's prosecuted for it. Is it
No,
true?
seemed true. I'd never heard anyone dispute those anything from the Panama Papers on its face as being incorrect. It was just that I just heard people making excuses for it, that there wasn't anything wrong with it. There was nothing illegal about it. That's all I heard the defense about it. So I assume it's probably true. And if it hadn't been some of those high profile people that were embarrassed by these things coming public, I think they would have pursued it really aggressively. So it probably was true.
Anyway, if I was Zelensky, I would exit stage left from the Ukraine and go someplace where he won't be hung from his heels after the Ukraine loses the war catastrophically, which it will.
Yeah. Okay. So next question.
Anyway, briberies everywhere. And frankly, it should be one of the most effective ways of getting what you want from a foreign government is simply hold, bribery is one thing and blackmail is the other to get what you want. You don't need a war with all kinds of missiles and destroying cities. I mean, these are human beings. All you have to do is intimidate them personally.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So next question he says, it seems technology is extremely deflationary. Example, digitization. In the past, letters were typed individually. Any typos required retyping the whole thing or correcting with other methods. Then it was put in an envelope, stamped and mailed, taking days to transfer the info. Imagine the cost of that for 1,000 letters. GPS, cell phone, etc. It's all saved millions, billions in costs and labor. Where have all the savings gone? It appears most cost savings has not been passed along to the consumer. Where did it go? Who did it go to? Is it bankers or taxes, inflation? And he says an ATM withdrawal in Latin America costs $5 per transaction. That has to be like a 99% profit. What are your thoughts?
Technology has always been the friend of the common man. It reduces his costs, increases his options, raises the standard of living tremendously. Technology is wonderful. And if we lived in a free market world, which we do not, the cost of things would be dropping precipitously, as opposed to the cost of things in dollar terms going up by, I don't know what the number is now, 8 or 10%. You can't tell because the numbers are all phony anyway. So if we had sound money, technology would, and of course, if we had sound money and costs were dropping all the time, the money that you saved would be capable of being profitably invested. More capital means more science discoveries, more engineering creations. I mean, look, we'd already be colonizing the moons of Jupiter, I think, if we didn't have the government and all the wastage that it imposes on us.
Do you think most of the deflationary effects of technology are offset by currency, by the currency inflation? Is it just covered up?
Well, it acts as a way to, all this money that goes into the maw of government, which is what happens with inflation, because they're the primary beneficiaries of inflation, and all the taxes that are sucked out of society going into the maw of government, it basically goes to consumption. High living on the part of the people, the individuals that steal the money, and active destruction on the part of the institutions that benefit from it. Well, the Defense Department and all these other giant bureaucracies that destroy capital. They don't create more capital. Yes, of course, I know the internet was invented essentially in its most basic form by the, was it
DARPA.
DARPA, yes. Well, okay, and if you set 1 million monkeys together with typewriters, yes, they would eventually get to a Shakespearean sonnet. So yeah, that can happen. There's no question about it. So the enemy of everybody is the government. The government isn't your friend. The government is the enemy of civilization and you personally. And I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, people don't really understand that. Or they might say, yeah, I don't like the government. But what do? They go out and vote for chimpanzee A as opposed to chimpanzee B. So I don't know if that answers the question. Yes, costs would, especially since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, would be falling precipitously everywhere as the amount of real wealth in the world grew. Anyway.
Okay.
Not going to
All
happen.
right.
Yeah.
Does Doug think we have more in common with people in the past or with the future? He says, the reason I ask is that if technological breakthroughs increasingly stack on top of the prior breakthroughs, perhaps there's an argument that change is increasingly speeding up and that change certainly isn't constant. So if so, it occurs to him that 50 years time ahead may look completely alien to us versus 50 years ago.
Well, he's absolutely right, in my opinion. Why do I say that? It's because, among other things, I mean, Ray Kurzweil has built an excellent case for something he calls the singularity. And the singularity is a time when all of these major threads of technology that we have today, nanotech and biotech and robotics and many things, computer tech, are all advancing at the rate of Moore's law. And he thinks, and I think he's probably right, barring a nuclear war or a chemical war, biochemical war, which is also pretty likely, that in, I don't know what he's projecting at the moment. It sounds like about 20 years, that the whole nature of the world will change totally as all these things come together. And it'll be wonderful. Well, it should be wonderful anyway, but the kind of people that go to work for the government will find some way of screwing it up, I'm sure. So yes, things are going to get much different in the future. But at the same, look, speaking personally, which is all I can do, it's that most of my reading is either ancient history, the distant past, or science fiction, the distant future. Gee, I ought to be better grounded in the here and now, perhaps, based on that. I don't know.
I don't know. I think both those things give you a different perspective on the here and now.
I think they do. Yeah, both of those things help me, I think, to interpret the meaning of what I can see in front of me in the here and now.
Hmm.
But what do I see in the here and now, right in front of me? As I've said many times in the past, what I really think I know is what I see on this screen we're looking at in one form or another. And the only thing that I really know for sure is see my backyard. I got grass and trees and cows and stuff like that. Well, that's actual reality as opposed to digital reality. So I don't know. Look, I don't even know what the nature of reality is. This is an open question as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Well, that's a bigger question. I think that the singularity basically where now it's kind of confusing as to what reality is because there's this digital life that seems to be something other than what you see outside your back door. But I think in Kurzweil's view, eventually those things come totally together. And so the nature of, the human experience is fundamentally altered.
Yeah, yeah. And, this brings a passing thought to my mind about that creepy little faggot that acts as the court intellectual for the World Economic Forum.
Harari.
Harari, yeah. Um, so his books have become international bestsellers. And I read the first one and skimmed over the second one. And basically, the first one is, two-sentence summary, an overview of the history of man to this point. Okay, most of the facts are, I think, correct. And his other one, two-sentence summary, is where things are going in the future. It's probably correct. The problem with people like that to do with technology is they want to get control of it and impose it on other people, and they want to be the ruling class and just give the useless eaters some entertainment until they die in their little cubicles. And they so anyway, technology is your friend.
Right. It seems like there's a fight, there's a war over that technology, and maybe there always has been over technology between the people who want it to be something that it liberates humanity versus something that oppresses humanity.
Hmm. Yeah, and the conversations come up about transhumanism. I mean, good thing, bad thing. Well, I don't know if Elon Musk succeeds with these brain implants and you want to do it. Yeah, I'd say go for it. It's your brain.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
well, I'm not going to do it either, or at least I'm not going to be the uh, beta test for.
I'm not doing it no matter what. No chance. I don't, just no chance. So
Well, it's nice that the option exists, but I'm afraid that these people that are trying to promote it are going to use our money so they can do their thing and impose it on us, and we'll pay for it with our money. That's how
yes,
stupid
and,
we are.
and induce you into a like a all-encompassing digital prison. I mean, that's what I see. They
That's
trap
right.
you.
Yeah, it's actually worse than the panopticon because you've got cameras everywhere and chips everywhere reporting everything.
Right.
So how's this going to wind up?
I think it, I think that there will be a assuming there's no cataclysm like you talked about with nuclear war or something, then I think you are going to have a real bifurcation of people. You know, people who basically are maybe zealots about not adopting the technology, and then the people who most people will happily sign up for it, just like they happily sign up for, you know, WorldCoin, you know, get their iris scanned. I mean, people are happy to do that stuff for the most part, I think. And it'll be better, especially if you imagine like life is, if the economic situation gets worse, you know, your real life is unpleasant, but you know, your digital life can be awesome.
Well, maybe the world will wind up like H.G. Wells projected it in his book, The Time Machine, where you have the gentle Eloy and the nasty, what did he call his those underground people in the Time Machine? They weren't orcs, although they were kind of orc-like. But the
I'll look it
Eloy,
up.
yeah, the Eloy were the kinder and gentler humans that were incapable of doing anything except eating lotuses all day. Well, who knows how things are going to evolve in the future? Since things are moving so quickly at this point, and after talking about Western civilization, since we've gone through our period of of uh, of those three stages of Bezarov.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
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 The
It's
first
a demoralization.
moralization. We're way past that. It's still happening, but we're way past that. We're well into destabilization. So the next thing is a crisis. I gotta believe long-awaited crisis is finally at our doorstep. At least I think it is.
I
Of
think
course, there were
so.
times in the past when I thought it was too. So hopefully we'll be wrong again.
It's the Morlocks.
The Morlocks, that's right. That's who they are. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So the next question was uh saying, sorry, where in Uruguay do you recommend to live? We said we checked out the coast around Punta Pegena and really liked it, but didn't venture further inland. They have a family of four. Do you have any insights for them? I mean, everything
Well,
in Uruguay is inland or is on the coast essentially.
yeah, and if you go inland, it's like being in Kansas, except with a lot less people, I think. So I basically describe it kind of a primitive version of Kansas with less people, even. Uh, well, I think the only answer to that question is what are you going to do when you get here? I mean, if you're a rich guy and you buy a nice place to hang out and you just hang out on the internet all day, I mean, or start a farm or whatever you want to do. But if you still got to earn a living, that's a different question. And that
Mhm.
good measure will determine where you live.
The other thing is kids. If you've got kids and they're, you know, where they need, you know, your whole life is generally oriented to some degree around the kids. So they have certain needs. And so that would probably preclude you from being, you know, far away and isolated from other families. So
Probably, yeah. But on the other hand, I don't know. I guess it depends on at the age of the kid. I mean, is it good that he hang out with other young yahoos that have questionable values and bad habits? I don't know. Got to find the right group of kids for him to hang out with, maybe.
that's the universal problem wherever you go.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Well, anyway, it's a question of what you do when you get here. I presume that the uh, the writer is kind of a digital nomad, so whatever he does is on the computer.
Yeah. Well, they're saying Punta Pegena, so that's basically around the Punta del Este area. There's a lot of expats in that area. You know, it's
Well,
a very livable place. So I can, yeah, that's good.
and it's on the beach, which is nice. So, but listen, Uruguay is an excellent choice, but maybe now, I mean, this is still up in the air, but maybe now Argentina is a better choice.
Could be. Just with the kids, you know, it's like more, I think more stability. It would be my default with kids. Depending on what age they are, but but
Yeah.
it could turn out to be really good. And certainly it's a lot cheaper. And I mean, you can, what's available, the services that are available to you there, I mean, vastly better than what you would get in Uruguay.
Yeah, much cheaper. I'd say got to be at least a third the cost, 2/3 less, third of what it is here in Uruguay, just across the river.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Okay.
hard to
So someone
answer
asked,
that question, isn't it? Really?
it's a very personal question. It depends, but I think you're right. It depends on what you're going to do. What you're going to do determines where you ought to be.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question was just asking, I mentioned a piece of software that allowed for voice simulations and translations. And it's called, and they asked what the name of it was. And I think I'm going to share the screen to demonstrate a little bit of Doug, of you speaking Mandarin, and Spanish, if you don't mind. I'd like to show.
Yeah. These things are quite amazing, actually.
Yeah, so let me find this real quick. I don't know if you looked at it at all. I sent it to you.
Yeah,
Let me,
I did when you sent it to me earlier. So
so
quite
this one
something.
is the Spanish.
Y esta fue la primera migración que conozco de todos modos, que fue impulsada por cosas religiosas o ideológicas en lugar de solo enjambres masivos.
Okay, so that's Spanish, and here's Mandarin.
Yeah, I can fake it in Spanish,
天的
but
报加利亚的阿德利安保击败罗马人的时候，这个胜利打开了所有北方野蛮人冲进罗马帝国的大门。那些也是移民，有一个应该被
Anyway, I think it's called HeyGen is the name of the software, and this stuff is gonna get. I'm actually gonna send it to someone and have them. I'm gonna send it to Jane's mom and ask her for feedback on the Mandarin to find out how on or off it is. But the Spanish sounds excellent.
pretty good. Yeah, it really is. So further proof that, they used to say, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. Well, I just saw it and I don't speak Mandarin, I promise you.
No, nor do you speak Spanish
I
that
barely
well.
speak Spanish.
No, it's super impressive. I liked showing it to your wife. She got a good chuckle out of it, listening to you, watching it. So it's funny. Well, and it's amazing because it actually changes your facial features to the shape it would have to be able to produce the accent like that. So it's impressive. And this is going to be twice as impressive in a year. I mean, or
Yeah.
6 months probably.
Yeah. Yeah, it really looks, how are you going to prove it's not legit at some point in the future? I mean, really.
That's right. And I mean, if they can make it so it looks like you're saying what you actually were saying, but saying it in a different language and looking authentic, like you're doing it, like it is you doing it, then it's just as easy to make it so that you're saying things that you aren't saying.
Yeah. And incidentally, that particular speech was from Giant Bandari's Capitalism and Morality Conference, which occurs in Vancouver every year. And I've spoken at, well, all of them since the first one, except for the last one. And I really like the speeches I gave over, it must be a 10-year period. And you can go to Capitalism and Morality, and a whole bunch of really good speakers at that. So if you want to entertain yourself philosophically, go there on YouTube.
Yeah, they're great speeches. Yeah, they're all on YouTube. And Giant does good work. He's hilarious also.
Yeah, he's actually very funny.
I don't, but he's not trying to be funny.
No, he's not. It's just that it's just like a good comedian. When he points out some reality, it's funny. And it's the same thing that
Exactly.
he's doing.
Yes, and he does it so directly and ruthlessly, like no pulled punches at all. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay. So next question is, does Doug think that ANCAPs are a type of collective people like the Franks or the Vikings or or any other group of people? And if so, wouldn't it make sense that we group up permanently?
Yeah. Well, I would not put us in the same class as the Vikings because, yeah, they shared a culture, true, and they shared a religion and values. Okay, yeah, that's one thing. But And ANCAPs are a variety of libertarian, actually. And libertarians basically kind of relate to Randites or objectivists, as they call themselves. And there's lots of other groups that are kind of, well, a lot of conservatives or like libertarian adjacent, if you would. So yeah, we birds of a feather like to flock together. But I used to have a friend, he's dead now, that used to remark that as much as he liked libertarians, but he was an ANCAP, that if he wanted to start a business, he'd basically want to hire a bunch of Nazis because you want people that, you know, are focused and single-minded and do what they're told. And you know, problem with libertarians and ANCAPs is they're often too ethereal. You know, they're a little bit like, I've got to say, any kind of ideologue. It's like, well, socialists and communists are the same way. I mean, they don't, most of them don't know how to make anything with their hands. They just know how to blah, blah, and try to supervise other people. It's like Mrs. Marx said to Carl once, Carl, stop writing about capital and get some of it, you know. So that's the problem with, that's the trouble with an ANCAP or libertarian community. So what you really want in a community is not necessarily shared political values. You want just people that have good ethics and act in a moral way towards.
Even the idea of community, that word, I hear it all the time, and I want people to define what the heck is that they're talking about exactly. I don't know what people mean when they say community. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. What does that mean? You're going to have a common dining hall where you all have dinner together? Well, maybe, but probably not. I mean,
What is a community? I mean, like to me, I think all like a community is simply an abstraction, an attempt to understand a complex reality that is just a series of or a network of individual relationships. That's all. It's just a network of individual relationships. And they relate to each other, and not every node in that network relates to other nodes in the network in the same way, but together they do relate. You know, maybe it's economically, or you know, there are shared values. There could be family ties as part of it. But it's not a thing. It's a series of things, and all based upon fundamentally individual, like actual relationships, one to one.
yeah. Well, maybe the best community or best example of a functional community in the US anyway is the Amish. Uh, they don't have, I don't think they have communal meals and this type of thing, but they get together for Sunday, go to meeting. That's nice. Get to see each other, press the flesh and say hi. That's nice. And somebody needs to build a barn. Well, everybody gets together and helps. That's nice. But otherwise, they don't necessarily see each other. Or they're just within their families. Families, mm-hmm. Thing. Family.
Which is a series of one-to-one relationships. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even family is an abstraction.
Yeah.
So what do you call your family? Is it just your direct descendants, or is it your second cousin? I mean, you know what I mean? It's an abstraction.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah. So anyway, I like, you know, people that share my political values, and that's what ANCAPism is all about. You're an anarchist and you're a capitalist. That covers the political and the economic part of the world. But there's a lot more to the world than politics and economics.
There is. And actually, this is recently some members of the file locally here. I told them that we have some neighbors who are wonderful neighbors who are, you know, they took COVID very seriously. Like, you know, definitely not like we did, you know, that but they took it very, very seriously. but they're great neighbors, and we get along wonderfully with them, and they're very thoughtful and considerate. We basically we don't talk about political stuff. We don't have to talk about political stuff. And so when I mentioned this to some friends in the file, they were surprised. They're like, "Wait, I can't believe you would associate, with people like that." And I'm like, "Are you like I don't do if I were to not associate with anyone based upon the what their odd personal beliefs, I think I would have to not associate with anyone on earth. I mean, anybody who has a religious belief, like that's fine. They can have I don't care. It doesn't hurt me if they believe, that, you know, uh, they believe that Jesus Christ is their personal Lord and Savior, and that works for them, man. I'm all for it. It doesn't affect me. And for some reason, some people think that this ideological litmus test in this one narrow category is so critical, that you need to get along on those things, and they just separate. Like, this was new. Like, you didn't have to. When I grew up, you didn't have to believe the same things as other people.
No.
And you can still associate freely and have fun, enjoy great relationships.
Yeah, exactly. That's, in fact, up until the time that you're a teenager, you rarely even talk to your friends about beliefs. You talked about doing stuff, as opposed to believing stuff. So,
Right. And it's only now, it's like where everything is political and everything, I think that there's an effort to push politics and ideology to the forefront and of human consciousness, when it's actually should be one of the least important things to all of us.
yeah, it should be. Well, maybe a lot of this is because of the growth of the government, where since the government, owns everything and controls everything and makes all the, yeah, you're almost forced to have political beliefs relative to the government. Further proof that the government is the great enemy of civilization. Everybody is an individual.
That's right. Okay. Next question. When would you consider renouncing your U.S. citizenship if you have a good second passport? Like, how bad would things have to get for you to do that, or for one to do that? Not necessarily you specifically. And are we close to those bad times where one should consider it?
Yeah, I think we're pretty close, but if this is why you should have a second passport, because if you're in the US, you basically got to do what the government tells you, or they'll do bad things to you. But if you go out of the US, then you need a passport. But the problem is the passport is the US government's property, so they can take it away from you electronically. So it's good to have a second one. Absolutely. But it doesn't solve any problems other than giving the US government less power over you. And so I don't know, should you renounce? It depends on whether you want to pay taxes and all this type of thing anymore.
Yeah.
It'll certainly be more convenient to have a second passport. I mean, because you can go to a lot more third countries and open up a bank account or brokerage account, which they won't do if they see that you got a US passport. They don't want you. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to get rid of it. But
someone asked a related question a little later. They're saying, what do you think the value of a second passport is? Because this person is staying essentially as a tourist in Argentina, and is considering whether or not it's worth the little bit of cost, I guess it is, and the commitments they'd have to make in order to get an Argentine passport. And so they were just curious about how you would even value it. How do you, what's the price you'd put on a second passport?
well, talking about Argentina, it's really one of the best. It's really an excellent passport. In defining what's a good passport, it's the amount of visa-free travel or visa on arrival travel that you can have. And that's about 145 countries. And at times in the past, it's been, don't even need a visa to come to the US. That's not the case now. Maybe it'll change in the future. So I think if you're spending time in Argentina, my understanding of the law is that you only have to be an Argentine resident for 2 years, which is the least amount of time of any country in the world. And residency means only being physically in the country 6 months of the year. So that's really easy duty. And so if I were you, I'd visit an Argentine law firm and get the show on the road, see how correct I am in details on that. And before you know it, you'll be an Argentine citizen. And you can look at Paraguay too. That's still, it's much harder than it used to be, but it's still pretty easy. And Uruguay is a different situation for any of these things. Of course, you can buy a passport. Somebody you say, what's the cost of it? There's no cost for those countries.
Right.
But you know, you can buy a passport from, I think the cheapest is Dominica, $100,000 plus a bunch of fees, like typically $25,000 or $30,000 in fees. That's for an individual, and for a family, I think it's 150 plus fees for a family.
And it takes like 7 or 9 months, the process, I think.
Something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for them to shuffle the papers and all that. Nothing wrong with that, but an Argentine passport is the place to go right now. It's more legit, you know, it's a real country. So yeah,
Yeah, if you're looking to put a value on it, I mean, you could just look at compare it with the economic citizenships, like Dominica, like you said. So that's 100 grand plus 7 or 8 months. And Argentina, it's legal fees fairly minimal, and 2 years. And if you're spending time there anyway, it seems like it would be a no-brainer. I don't know what the negative consequences of getting it might be, but I don't think there's many.
I don't think there are any. And if Argentina goes the wrong way after Milei leaves office, I hope he doesn't for another 8 years, frankly, then you just leave Argentina and you got a great passport and live someplace else. So yeah, do it.
Okay. All right, next question. The Fed's reverse repo is draining at a steady clip, and there are concerns of a liquidity crunch once it dries up. The facility has drained from 2.5 trillion in 2022 to 493 billion today. It's projected to run dry by March or April if the trend continues. What are the consequences to the market and economy at large if this drain continues?
Well, I think this is getting back to the, at this point, very old question of how's this all going to end with a catastrophic credit collapse where there's, or where interest rates go too high and they reduce the money supply and people can't pay their debts and businesses fail and have to fire their employees. And so that's one thing. And maybe at the moment they're heading in that direction, or they got to keep printing money one way or another to keep the ball rolling. So that doesn't happen. And then you run into a runaway inflation. So which is it going to be? Well, like I've said a number of times in the past, it can be either in sequence, one then the other, or both at the same time in different areas of the economy. I mean, the only thing I think we can be reasonably certain of with the world the way it is tough times. I don't know if that's an answer or not.
Well, I think so. Basically, if this liquidity is pulled out of the system, then that leans toward the credit collapse deflationary scenario versus the inflationary scenario. So if it continued as it's going without anything else in place, then it adds credence to that happening. Is that right?
It does. It does. Yeah. So instead of having all of these idiots at the Fed and the Treasury Department and other agencies trying to ineffectually stick their fingers in dikes and actually making things worse, the answer is to have a sound monetary system, which is to say, just use gold. You could probably use Bitcoin too at this point. It seems like it's well enough established. And get rid of fractional reserve banking and divide all bank deposits as they once were into demand deposits and time deposits and things of this nature. Well, that's not going to happen because that would undo the whole damn system. So we could have a stable economy where everything isn't financialized and the stock market is a place where, if you like a public company that's public because it needs to raise capital to do productive things. That's not what's going on today at all. Not at all. You buy the shares and hopefully it pays dividends and get rich the way Warren Buffett did, kind of. Yeah.
With Coke, his Coke investment. Yeah, that's a good example of that.
Yeah, that's the way it should work. But it doesn't work that way right now. It's all a moving paper fantasy.
Right. And speculation. It's speculation in that maybe speculation isn't the right word, but the way you win is if you can sell this thing for more in the future, not rather than being a partner or business owner where you actually get paid from the profits of the company. I mean, the profits of companies are almost irrelevant at this stage, which is why, that so many companies are running, can't even service their debt today.
Yeah, if we lived in a free market economy without currency inflation, speculation would be very rare. And it'd be hard to find the distortions that make for speculations. So all these people in the market are really just gambling. That's all. It's just gambling without a casino. And you don't even get free drinks.
All right. Let's see. If you were a young guy working in Europe, you see that the situation in Europe is getting bad with the war. When would you get out of there? When do you think that the European conscriptions will start? And when do you think the direct conflict between NATO and Russia will eventually begin?
Yeah, well, the question is there going to be a direct conflict between NATO and Russia? You can build arguments both ways, why it will happen and why it won't happen. Of course, it shouldn't happen. There's absolutely no reason it should happen. But, we're dealing with psychopaths, certainly in the NATO countries. I think Putin is a pretty stable guy. And as a leader, within the context of world leaders, which is, of course,
it's a low bar.
A low bar, right? He's probably the most decent guy of all those criminals. So I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, did anybody really want and people weren't? Did anybody really want World War I or really see it coming? Kind of took on a life of its own. So.
But just in the last few weeks, there's been all of these, well, let's just say the NATO countries up until about 2 months ago, if anything, they were downplaying the situation that was happening there. Of course, Ukraine is winning, we need to support Ukraine, but something reversed recently where they're saying that we need to prepare, Sweden needs to prepare to fight Russia directly. The UK needs to prepare. We might, we have to reintroduce the draft. And that's, several countries have picked up, and that's like a new line of argument.
Yeah.
There's got to be jarring to people who are there because.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, we're dealing with, criminality and psychopathology on the part of these people that run these countries. Good question. But
so would you get out of Europe if you're a young man?
I'd get out of Europe anyway if I was a young man. And I do it for the same reason as I tell young Americans. You've got no marginal advantage if you're just one out of 100 million other young guys. I mean, basically, you all got the same culture and same backgrounds and the same amount of money. And, so that's why I like Africa, because you've got I think you ought to go to Africa, frankly, because you're going to be different. everybody's going to want to meet you. You're going to have skills and knowledge and connection and capital that the locals don't have. So you're bringing something to the party. And when you bring something to the party, yeah, everybody wants to meet you and you move up the food chain, as opposed to just staying in Europe where you might get drafted and that'd be horrible. So answer to the question, that's what I would do if I was a European that was afraid, as you justifiably are.
Okay. All right, next question. It says, I've taken the decision to invest in whiskey. Which alternative investment does Doug think holds untapped potential? Wine, artwork, tobacco, coffee? Does anything come to mind?
That's an interesting question. You know, God, how long ago? This is a long time ago. 50 years ago, there were a lot of, or at least some, Scottish and maybe Irish too, whiskey distillers that were raising money from Americans to finance the aging of their whiskey. Because of course you make the whiskey and you got all your costs and it's got to sit there for 3 or 10 or 20 years. And hey, you got that money tied up for all that time. So yeah, that's how it used to be. I guess it's still done that way, probably. Okay, that's fine. Unless the Deagle report is right, and it's starting to look like they might be with this COVID.
They're right on the trend, at least the trend.
It is really odd. I mean, people, if it turns out, people are going to ask themselves, hey, remember that guy predicted it? So he knew something about COVID or God knows what. But so, yeah, do you want to finance the aging of whiskey, which is basically what it amounts to? I don't know. And what are the other things that he mentioned?
He said wine, artwork, tobacco, coffee.
Okay, well, I guess it's the same thing. You can invest in a vineyard, probably lose money.
Pretty much. There's not many cases otherwise I've heard of.
Everybody, it's a hobby. It's a hobby for rich guys that want to say they have a vineyard. And sometimes you can get lucky, I suppose. Or you can buy a case of wine and hope that a greater fool will buy it for more money. But it's, my view, and I know connoisseurs are going to argue with me, it's mostly marketing. I mean, yeah, I can tell the difference between some wines and some other wines, no question. But the fact of the matter is, if you blindfold somebody and if you blindfold somebody and the wine is all the same temperature, most people can't tell the difference between red wine and white wine. Forget about between Pinot Noir. I mean, so it's a marketing scam. It's like diamonds. Talk about this type of thing. I mean, it's not done now because they're in I think, a terminal bear market. But people were investing in diamonds. I always thought it was ridiculous, frankly. And now there are at least 2, and I think more, separate methods to make perfect, flawless diamonds. Or maybe diamonds that aren't flawless, so that you really can't tell them from real diamonds. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's it's like investing in cut glass. I mean, that doesn't make, look, say, well, maybe I should invest in cars. Well, I'd say you're probably 20 years at least too late, because now everybody is investing in cars, and there's warehouses full of exotic cars people are holding like forever, and the time to invest in rare cars is like during the 1930s, when you could buy a Duesenberg in a barn with owls and flat tires and stuff like that. That's when you invest, not now. So it's the same with most of the stuff. What's another one of these things?
Well, he said artwork.
Artwork, promotional scam. Look, every day, actually every day, because they send it to me every day, there's an auction house, and it has hundreds of paintings of all kinds. I mean, I'm particular, so I ask them to just send me certain types of paintings. And they're original. Some of them are huge. I mean, like 5 or 10 feet wide, oil on canvas, or small, or, elegantly framed, or all kinds of stuff, different stuff. And when these things are auctioned from estates or from artists that have died, there's more artwork in the world than anybody can possibly imagine. I mean, museums have basements and warehouses full of good artwork that they can't display because there's not enough room to display it all. And it's, look, artwork is all about promotion. We can talk about and what's good artwork and what's bad artwork. Most of this artwork that sells for how many figures? Well, I'm kind of count the zeros, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. As far as I'm concerned, it's shit. And why do I say that? Because I'm not skilled, but at least I fancy, yeah, I could do that. Could I do what Rembrandt or Marco? No, I couldn't. Forget about it. But most of the stuff that's selling for insane prices today, it's a marketing scam. So, and and you can buy these artworks, which are actually technically very competent, and some of them are very interesting. I bought some of them because I like them. What are you going to pay? Minimum bid is often $1, and you can buy really what I find interesting and technically excellent and ideationally interesting. You look at it and say, oh, that's interesting. In addition to being done by somebody that knows how to do things with artwork, you can buy these things for $100. I mean, that's amazing. That's much less than the cost of the materials. Forget about the labor.
Right.
So, yeah, investing in artwork, it's a marketing scam as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, forget about
So
that.
if you can be in the cartel, then you could do very well with art, right? But otherwise,
Yeah, but you're not going to get in the cartel because somebody is running an ad saying, "Give me some money and I'll invest this artwork." No, you're not going to be in the room with the guys that are. No, forget about it. Anyway, if you got to ask the question, you shouldn't be doing it. You got to ask the question. What? Anything else that?
well, then he mentioned some commodities. He says tobacco and coffee.
Tobacco. Look, I smoke cigars, and I'm shocked at the prices that they're getting for good cigars today. I smoked what I believe is the finest cigar in the world the other day. A friend of mine had a box of them. And I said, "What are these things going for these days, Garrett?" And well, there was somebody looked it up it was $115 a stick.
Euro, yeah.
Euros, right? That is insane. So can you invest? But you can't really invest in them because there's risks to even buying good cigars and putting them away. Because this has happened to me. Somehow these little worms can get into your cigars and burrow, and they become unsmokable. So can't do that. Can't invest in cigars. Don't know how you invest in coffee. It's a cultural commodity. And anything that's a commodity, you can't invest in. Okay. It's just
that's something you might speculate in from time to time. That's how you
might. But there's millions of tons of that shit floating around the world. So no, but on the other hand, I think the questioner is thinking in the right way. I mean, maybe you'll find something that will be like the Barbie doll, and you can buy it for a couple of bucks, like you could in the 50s or 60s. And now they sell for, I don't know how much they sell for, thousands sometimes. Or Cabbage Patch dolls. They were a mania that,
it's insane.
Yeah, for a while. I don't know what Cabbage Patch dolls are worth today, if anybody cares about them even. So, I mean, you're thinking in the right way, but
also, but those are that whole category is like a collectible category, which requires, versus another class of alternative investments would be things that actually produce income for you, right?
Yeah,
Rather
that's
than
a
to require that there'd be demand for it in the future necessarily.
yeah. And the thing is with all the funny money that's been created, people are looking. It's artificially bulled up all these things that maybe it's turned into a bubble. And at some point, all these Franklin Mint plates and all that, they're going to melt them down for the silver value, which is just a tiny percentage of what you pay for the junk. So, I mean, there's some things that I think are interesting that I've collected in the past, and two things that I think are still worthwhile. I'll just tell you what I'm doing is I like handmade knives. I mean, some of these makers are real artists, and these knives are pieces of artwork, and they're like essentially, not always, but one-off specials. So
Mm.
yeah, if you get to know that, and prices can be reasonable, a few $100s, maybe 1,000 or something like that, depending on the maker. I don't know what the market is today. That's one thing. And another thing I think it makes sense are ancient coins.
Mm.
They really are artwork. They're, most people don't understand them. And so I like ancient coins. I don't
Mm.
like the government slugs that have dates and, that's, it's a different thing. But
Mm.
ancient coins are different. So those are two things I'd suggest.
Okay. There actually was a knife maker expo in Punta last weekend. I wanted to go. I was too busy, but they had all these like 80 or 90 blacksmiths were there, knife makers were there.
Oh, is that a fact? Oh, I wish I'd known. Well, I guess that's an annual thing, huh?
It's an annual thing now. I think it just started last year, and this was the second year, as I understand it.
Well, the third year, let us make sure
Let's
we
go.
both go.
Yeah, I'd like to see them. It looked good. I love that stuff, and the people from all of the 80 or 90 or whatever from around the country that do it. It'd be cool.
Mhm.
So, all right, let's see. Next question then. This says, are there any good books on farming or owning farmland that you would recommend? I just think if you're getting started, Joel Salatin and stuff, right?
Yeah, Joel Salatin stuff. That's definitely where you start. And he's written what, 16 books, I think he said.
At least, yeah, lots, and they're easy to read and very useful. And he talks about the economic aspect of farming. He breaks that all down. He's got all the numbers, and so he can give you just the business side of it as well as the production side.
Yeah, that's got to be the best place to start. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be others, but can't go wrong with Salatin.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Next question. Doug, the American life is increasingly feeling unlivable for a middle-class family. We're planning to move to Argentina with the birth of our third child. How long will the US be a terrible place to live? With historical cycles and communism in mind, could it be 100 years for it to recover?
No, that's a good question. Well, I don't know. Let's suppose attack this a couple different ways. Supposing in December, there were 300,000 migrants that wandered across the Mexican border that they know of. I mean, that's what they say. That's what they've reported. There's probably more. There's lots of getaways and that. So is that going to slow down? If it doesn't slow down, it's probably going to be another, 5 million. And it'll accelerate. I think it'll accelerate. The reason is because they all get cell phones and they call their pals back home. Come on in. They give you all kinds of free shit. Just wander over with a pair of sneakers and a t-shirt and you'll get $1,000 a month and they give you a hotel to live in and, money. So I think the cat's out of the bag. And pretty soon, all these people are going to come across, and they're not going to stay in Mexico because they're going to be at the border. What are the Mexicans going to do with 500,000 migrants? They don't know
Month.
what they'll say. Go to the United States. They love you there. They're going to keep coming. So, answer to the question: yeah, the U.S. is going to change for that reason alone if it continues. I don't know well or not.
Yeah, I think the migration thing is that is an intractable problem, because once it's done, once it gets past a certain critical mass, there is no resolution to it. You know, I mean, you can't deport them. It's hard to imagine what it would take to deport what is it, 30 million illegals that are in the US now? I mean, I saw before this latest wave, the numbers, someone report it was over 20. That's before anyone was even talking about immigration. So
Yeah,
so you gotta assume it's got to be
and
30 million.
deport them to where? I mean, they throw away their IDs and that. You can't get on a commercial plane without the airline won't take you. Forget about anything else.
Right. And these people that are coming now, it's almost like I read this technology adoption book in the late 90s called Crossing the Chasm. And it talked about, like with technology, like the early adopters, the people who would always wanted to try something new, the risk takers. And I think and then how that then becomes like a mass adoption of technology. And I think that also explains social movements too, because the migrants now, this 300,000 in December could literally be the very early adopters, the ultra risk takers, the people who plunged into the unknown. And now that it's not unknown, it could be, mass adoption could be underway.
That's a very good point. Yes, that's an excellent point, actually. Yeah, that's what's likely to happen. And you can't get rid of them once they arrive. I mean, the Europeans are we're in a lot of trouble, but the Europeans are even in much more trouble than we are. I mean, these migrants, and in Europe, they're all Muslims. I mean, a certain percentage of the people coming to the US are Muslims, which is bad because I've got, I'm not a religious person, but that religion is really a problem. Individual Muslims, just fine, no problem. But you get them together and, they start acting like Muslim. So
yeah, I mean, it was definitely much harder to become, the melting pot if you hold on to that shared cultural identity, right?
yeah, and you can see in Britain, where they've taken over whole cities or certain whole areas of cities. Same in France, especially Paris. Same in Holland.
Well, there's the
So
Somalis in Minneapolis, right?
yeah, and I don't know if they socialize with the Norwegians that lived there before or not.
I don't know, but they're very politically active.
And their representation in Congress are not the kind of people that I want to have anything to do with. I mean, what's the name of those two Muslim women that are part of the squad? These are horrible people. As of when?
Yeah, I don't know if it's my connection or what, but we just froze for a second. So you're talking about the representation in Congress.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these Muslim women that are part of the squad, they have horrible ideas and they seem to be horrible people, aggressive, nasty people. So they were elected by somebody that must like their ideas. So this is going to end badly, and it's getting worse. I mean, look at what's happening in Sweden, which has become the rape capital of Europe.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
on the other hand, it's too bad, but people get what they deserve. And if the Swedes or the idiots they elected, and they elected them, allow this to happen, well, I'm sorry, but you're stupid and you're getting what you asked for. Well, things change. And in 1,000 years, the who knows what the world will look like if it still exists. I mean, so this will just be a blip on the screen. So don't worry about it too much. But it's too bad. I mean, the US was nice while it still existed.
Okay, well, let me just do a couple more questions. This one, does Doug believe that an economic system based on the Nash equilibrium could be viable? Everyone would seek the best, not online for themselves, but also for the others, he says.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that theory. I even saw the movie with Russell Crowe and didn't get anything out of the movie. But the one thing the one kind of takeaway I got from it, and I don't know if this was what was on Nash's mind or not, is that the part that I remember of the Nash equilibrium is that if you go to a bar where there's a bunch of girls, the average guy will pick out a kind of an average girl because figure, well, chances are she's going to be available because she doesn't have a wide selection of males. But that's the wrong approach because everybody's going to go for that mediocre girl. What you should do is go for the best looking girl because everybody's so intimidated by her. You got the best girl and nobody's going after her because everybody's afraid that everybody's going after her, but they're wrong. So that's what I took away from it. Nothing else, but maybe you know more about it than I do.
Yeah, I don't really, all I know is it has to do with game theory, and fundamentally I hate game theory. I hate the idea that it's been so popularized and made credible for how people should function in society. Like I get how game theory as a strategy applied to zero sum games for entertainment and distraction, and I get that, but as a strategy for life, I mean, I think it's actually pretty repulsive, I think.
I completely agree. I mean, Socrates, I think, would agree too. It's a question of playing off of other people's psychological foibles and manipulating what you think they're going to do and putting out PR to further change perceptions as opposed to reality. No, I also hate the idea of game theory.
And it also presumes that human motivations can be boiled down to simple efforts to acquire advantage that can be measured, meaning like specifically like material advantage. Does this action give them a carrot or a stick? And that's how humans behave. And I think at its lowest form, a lot of human behavior might be explained that way, but created when humans behave in that way. You know what I mean? Like, what art is created, what businesses are started. It makes no sense to do these things. It's too much work, if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Game theory encourages cynicism on the part of everybody, where you feel everybody can be manipulated. Now, like with that example I gave of which girl do you choose in the bar for which reasons? Well, okay, it's understandable. Yeah, all right, I understand. But it's not admirable.
No, and that's the thing. When I was first thinking about this, any any culture that is honor would reject game theory out of hand because of the idea that there is some good beyond this simple measurable material gain, simple advantage. Like how would the samurai, they wouldn't, they just wouldn't have anything, they would not participate in the game. It's like that what's that Matthew Broderick movie where there's like World War II war games. In the end, it says the only way to win is not to play. Like
Oh, yeah,
that's
right.
that's true at all these game theory, these zero sum games where you're put at, you're competing within this narrow set for these minor advantages. I mean, it's not even a worthwhile pursuit as a
Yeah,
life structure.
exactly. It's somebody else's game. I don't want to play somebody else's game to start with. Wait a minute. But what was the exact question? We've gotten
Ah,
off on a tangent, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, sorry. He asked, do you think that it would be that an economic system based upon that would be viable?
No, look, you have something called free market capitalism, and that's really by far, there's not the best economic system, the most natural, the most productive, the one with the, so forget about free market capitalism. That's the answer to the question.
Yeah, I think people like Harari would believe that, in fact, that it would work. It would be the most viable way of actually organizing an economy. You know, this technocratic carrot and stick approach for, you know, the small people. Like, I think they would like it. But I mean, you're right. The thing about free market capitalism is that it allows for both, like, two things to be considered. Like an individual who owns himself, their own personal expression of what they want to do with their life, like their own expression balanced with, um, does it provide value to other people? You know, the reality of that, like I could succeed more if if what I'm doing, my own personal expression in my life is valuable for others, then I do better in that. And so those two things like naturally coexist without conflict.
Yeah, they do. And when anybody trades with somebody else, it's because both of them feel like it's a win-win situation. They both feel they're improving their situation by making the trade. So,
Right. And I also feel like in many ways the people though who think of these things as game theory don't they're it works it works when all the chips are on the table, meaning like the full game is understood, you know, and it's limited to these boundaries. But the real world has innovation, advances in technology, entrepreneurship, like, you know, individual rational actions just because they want to see something done. Like that, it doesn't account for any of that shit, which is all the stuff that makes all the difference.
that is an excellent point. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So another reason why most of the economics that's taught in college is unproductive or even counterproductive because it encourages students to look at things from a corrupt point of view.
Okay. Last question for you. If you had to live in the USA, where would you live? Where is a wholesome environment with good people who are aspiring?
Well, it would not be a sanctuary city. You know, I used to love California. I used to love San Francisco. Forget about it today. So I don't know.
I used to even love Chicago.
Yeah, yeah, I grew up in Chicago. I used to love Chicago. Yeah, no, no more. So where would you go today? I don't know. And of course, all
Well,
these nice little mountain towns in the West have been overrun by refugees from California, many of them bringing their values with them, whether they know it or not.
if
So
nothing
where
else,
do
they've driven up the costs tremendously
yeah,
also. You know,
yeah,
so it's not affordable to go to get into northern Idaho in the way that it was 10 years ago.
yeah, yeah. So where do you go today? Hmm.
If you're looking for wholesome, the only generalized area, like it or not, I would just say it's Utah.
Yeah, Utah is a pretty good choice.
Just
I
because of
mean,
the Mormon, you know, family oriented local focus. I mean,
mhm. Yeah, that's true. Well, when I'm in the US, I live on the Chesapeake Shore in Virginia, a place where I've said you drive down any road, any state road going to or from anywhere, and I promise you, there's a church every mile, if not every half mile. And, it's pretty culturally stable for that
hmm.
reason. I mean, it's the kind of thing that happens. Of course, Virginia itself has Northern Virginia, which is full of government workers, absolutely full of them. And that slants the political makeup of Virginia, Northern Virginia, which really ought to be a separate state. It's so different from the rest of Virginia.
Mm.
Well, north of Richmond, that song, which used to be proper. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Well, the part so wholesome, and the thing is where people are aspiring. It's a place with economic opportunity. That's why I think, and where you are in Virginia, it's not just, I don't know what you almost need a population of young people that are.
yeah, it's an economically backward area where young people are moving out because nothing happens there. So, yeah, and the retirees that are coming there are ex-bureaucrats from Northern Virginia that have made some money. And so I don't know, you can run, but you can't hide, I mean, Joe Louis was right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. I hope you have a good weekend, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah, fantastic. Talk to you then, Matt.